Welcome to Forza Motorsport. We're here on Xbox Series X. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. This is the rebirth, the reboot, and the revitalization of the Forza Motorsport franchise. This is the closed circuit experience as opposed to Horizon, which is an open world offering in regards to an offshoot of what Forza Motorsport is and what it provides. We have a few different visual options, and we're going to be showing those throughout the course of the video. So now we're going to be just kind of briefly letting you see the different display options. There's Performance RT, which was my preferred way to play. There's Performance, which is the game's suggested option. And there's Visual. So Visuals is the full push in regards to the visual quality. Performance is the general sort of, this looks fantastic and plays really smooth and fluid. And Performance RT gives you that current gen shine and flare of ray tracing. So you'll see on top of the screen occasionally showcasing what is being presented, but as I had mentioned, Performance RT was my preferred mode and the one you'll see the most often. So for Performance mode, regular Performance mode, 60 FPS, a dynamic 4K resolution, which is pretty upper bounds in regards to the visual fidelity. The reflections RT is off, and the AO technique is baked AO. Quality mode, which is visuals, quote unquote, 30 FPS, dynamic 4K resolution, again, quite upper bounds. And then for reflections, the car's mirror has ray tracing, and the track's mirror has all ray tracing as well when it comes to reflections. And RTAO is the AO technique. Performance RT. So this is 60 FPS, a dynamic 4K resolution, though I will note that you can really tell to a degree that there is quite some droppage. At the same time, it still looks absolutely fantastic, and it's mostly in the reflections that you do notice a lower resolution visual fidelity, which does maybe stick out a little bit if you're really looking at it. But I will say I was overly just quite impressed with what Performance RT has to offer in regards to the visual fidelity, the realism, and that closer element of actually capturing natural looking reflections and environments impacting your car as you're driving along. I think it looks just absolutely fantastic. So with that, reflections, cars RT mirror, all, and tracks RT mirror, none. So the AO technique again is RTAO. So the big difference here between Performance RT and quality really comes down to the mirrored elements of, the tracks. So there is a cinematics home space car theater, which is 30 FPS, 4K, dynamic, and it's just kind of a showcase thing, so it's basically a quality mode, but it just makes the cars look really, really nice when you are taking them in. So some other elements of the experience I should mention outside of the specific performance modes. HDR Sport, which I think was kind of expected. VRR, variable refresh rate. You've got spatial sound, Dolby Atmos, DTS:X, and yeah, the audio in this really has a nice crunch to it. The audio was like a noticeable thing here, because usually I'm like, oh yeah, the Forza games, they sound good, they sound realistic, the cars are there. But as soon as I drove into this one and literally drove into someone else, I was like instantly hearing those crunches, those crackles, it's got like a punchy sound to it that I'm just not used to with previous Forza titles. So that was genuinely impressive. So this game has a real focus on trying to build out more of a career-like mode while still presenting various quick play options. Now I should mention, and while there is updates ahead of launch, I did notice from a technical standpoint quite a few crashes up into the tens, and that was pretty, it was common enough that I definitely felt the need to mention it, though that may very well be patched. I'm not quite aware, and I didn't quite get details sent over in regards to that aspect of it, so I did want to make sure that wasn't known. Always seems to be as soon as you finish a race or try to go and watch the track replay. It seemed pretty common and prevalent. On top of that, I did have a few scenarios where the game had a forever load and I'd have to restart. Just a couple little technical bugs here or there that were present. I don't necessarily think they fully detract from the experience, but in all my days of reviewing Forza titles going back to, I guess, basically 6, 7, and then Horizon 2 to 5, I've never really come across any sort of crashing or anything, so I thought that was a bit of a stick out point. So let's go and talk about the career mode a little bit more in depth now that we've got a lot of the technical elements out of the way. So this is a big change up. I personally just kind of enjoy doing the quick play and stuff, but I know people have been wanting for quite a while to have a Forza experience where they go back to focusing a bit more on actual, I guess I wouldn't really call it storytelling, but you know, kind of a career progression where you are earning parts, you are earning cars, you are completing these cup experiences. So it's kind of the cup career mode. You've got like trial runs, you got to win so much of your races to get enough points. There's a variety of these different kinds of like events and stuff that you can go and take part in order to build up your vehicle, fine-tune it, and be able to compete against others. Again, didn't really care much for this mode. It's a nice thing to have for those that kind of want it. It's a nice addition, and it does offer a lot of gameplay value in regards to working through those, getting the rewards, and thus being able to get yourself more vehicles of the over 500 real-world cars from just a massive selection of different manufacturers. And apparently something like over 100 of these cars are brand new to the motorsport experience, which is, you know, really exciting. That with that though, you're going to probably imagine that some vehicles that you might have been familiar with are probably out of the loop, and that is definitely the case also when you go to the track racing experiences. But we'll get to tracks a little bit later on. So with the career mode comes, again, the performance elements of it, like upgrading your vehicle, adjusting your vehicle. There's something like 800 different performance type upgrades that you can tweak, manipulate, and change within the game. You're going to have to also basically handle more advanced racing elements in like regards to managing the status of your vehicle going off and kind of getting things repaired. You're going to have to make sure that you are playing within the lines and not cheating or anything, otherwise you can have point penalties. And it's just got a lot of depth to it in regards to the career campaign quote-unquote type mode. So you might find that to be intriguing. You know, the Builders Cup career mode is kind of the big thing around this, so you're either going to be really into that, or, you know, maybe that's not for you. Who's to say? There's quick play, so you can just jump in, play matches, you know, time trials, regular races, practice type stuff. There's also the robust multiplayer experience for up to 24 players. These are very interesting rotating competitions that are sort of in the multiplayer hub world. They're posted, they start at certain times, and then, you know, there's other more dynamic elements, and I'm sure the multiplayer aspects will change over time, but the multiplayer really seemed to me to be focused around doing these competitions, these circuit, you know, races and battles, and just like a rotating selection of different playlist options that were present. So that seems to be a pretty, you know, sort of well-versed, well-in-depth and detailed sort of offering mode-wise if you do want to go in and compete with what the best of the world has to offer. It almost reminds me of the more traditional old-school racing games multiplayer-wise, such as like what PGR kind of had in the older Forza Motorsport titles. So a little bit of a return to form in that regard, just for how you kind of compete and interact with others in the multiplayer space. Let's talk about the tracks, the visuals, and the overall scope of what this has to offer. So this is a true current gen racing game. This is the prestigious technical showcase of what we've been looking for in regards to a racing game that is actually pushing the technology of the consoles. This is something that I really wish we would have had maybe closer or at the launch of the platform, as this really does actually push the Series X and actually present a visually impressive upgraded experience that feels like a bump up significantly over what we had with previous entries in the franchise. Whether that's in regards to how detailed things are, the new technology at play, the way lighting is handled, this is a genuinely impressive visual showcase, and it does seem to actually really push just what this console can do, and that is quite exhilarating and quite exciting to play. As soon as I'm jumping on here on these tracks and racing along, I can see that they're aiming for a realistic world, one that has elements of, hey, this is really, really intensive and technical if you want it to be, and also this is a little bit arcadey if you want it to be in that direction as well. Obviously, the Horizon franchise is the experience you go to if you do want to experience something that's more on the arcade open world free style of things. But I've always appreciated the Forza Motorsport franchise because while it is something that can be competitive and intense, it also offers a side of fun, a side of adventure where if you just want to race along these tracks, you can go ahead and do so. So with that, again, Forza I do firmly believe is a place where dreams are driven, and they hit that mark very well, having a just massive selection of vehicle options and ways that you interact with the tracks. So the game has a 20 track list. These environments are living places that have been rescanned, reset up, and made to be completely dynamic for this new era of Forza Motorsport. So you have things that basically change and make every single time you race on these tracks different. There are a massive selections of dynamic weathering options from your regular, I don't know, let's say pick a time of day, noon, night, sunset, sunrise, and some options in between. The time of day, that impacts how everything looks for your lighting. And then you move past that and you select the type of weathering. You can have random weathering too if you want a completely different showcase every time you go at it. But they have a massive selection of unique weathering elements. So you can have dynamic things where it's like over the course of your race, the rain, it's not there, and then it's subtle, and then it's heavy, and then it's light, and you can have that sort of thing. We've seen that a little bit in the past, but I think it's a lot more in-depth and detailed within this particular entry and offering the franchise. But going past that, you've got tracks that get worn. You see the tire marks. You feel the track getting broken and worn down by the vehicles skidding along it, especially if you get to those longer races where you've spent more time going along these circuits. And you sit there's 24 cars going across these tracks, and it wears and it tears on these environments. You get to see objects within the environment that you might accidentally run into, get hit and thrown out into the distance or out onto the track or something for others to hit. The vehicles get actually damaged in chunky, meaningful ways. You see actual tearing and scratching alongside the cars as you bump into them. You see those dents. And if you are someone like myself that's a little, careless in regards to hitting vehicles along the way, you really do at the end of your race see wow, I did a number on this car, and it really is just quite exciting and interesting and detailed. And going back to sound, that crispy crunch of you hitting a vehicle is just quite intensive. It sounds intensive, it looks realistic, and it's just fantastically done from that angle. So coming back to the tracks and talking about those a bit more, you get a large selection of very circuit-focused racing options, and they look really quite incredible. And then you get some variations within those racing options too. And then you add the weathering, like I mentioned, the time of day. But the weathering itself just really is quite, variable. From just the variables of your weathering changing, but also things like fog and a mist and haze and stormy and overcast and cloudy or not cloudy or just sunny, and you mix this all together and you create these situations where every single time you go and you race, the circuit is different, the competition is different, and the situation is different every time you go at it. And it's very, very beautifully well done, and it looks just gorgeous. The tracks themselves are genuinely impressive as well. I couldn't really notice any sort of pop-in, maybe to the tiniest degree if you're really, really looking for it. But these tracks are just so perfectly well set, with these dimensional trees, and trees that move too. This is something I've noticed more as the entries in the Forza franchise has come and gone, basically, is we're finally getting, a track that not only is the pavement that you're kind of roaring past realistic, but also the places you go by. The trees, they do move when it storms. The trees are reactive to the world around you, and they're filled with detail and depth. Same with the smaller things. There's crowds, there's maybe a helicopter going by. You may notice building structuring or other little things, and they're all responsive and all reactive to the experience that is going on within the game. And that helps make it just feel a lot more natural and as if you are actually doing a racing competition, which is quite exciting. And just, it really does take a second for you to really just take it all in. The way the lighting is done here feels very natural to the eye, and it just comes across as an environment that is detailed and again aiming for a sense of realism to the highest degree. A genuinely impressive leap forward for the technology that we've seen within the Forza franchise, a franchise that has, innovated many times over the years, basically. And it's just quite interesting and exciting to see this leap, because it has been a significant amount of time since the previous entry, basically the longest we've ever had to wait. And I think the time was well spent in providing an experience that does actually feel expansive. And like I mentioned, 20 tracks, all scanned, all aiming to provide different places from around the world to incredible levels of realism, live on-track scoring, full dynamic time of day with weathering, and completely unique driving conditions that, like I said, basically make every single race unique and distinct. You are never doing the same thing twice. I mean, obviously, the track is a track, but just like in real life, you're never sure what sort of variable you're going to get in regards to nature outside, and that in itself is really quite exciting to see. Now with that, the 20 tracks do come across as very circuit-based. Some of the racing options are literally, the oval tracks, but you get a choice to kind of mix them up a little bit too. Like I mentioned, there's different lengths of how the tracks are done. With that though, there are some noticeable missing track levels from previous Forza entries, and I do hope that we get to see those sort of things added over time. Now this is supposed to be a long-term Forza title, the hub that they will build from and expand upon as time goes on. But yeah, I was just sitting there being like, where are the Bernese Alps? What about Prague? What about Rio? There's a large selection, or the buy level. Even comparing this to 7, it does feel like there are a significant quantity of levels, or tracks, you would say more appropriately, that are missing from the experience. It is a good roster of kind of tracks, but I do always kind of miss the days where a new entry was basically a chance to add more content, and it seems like we're constantly rebuilding from the ground up and losing content along the way instead of just constantly growing things. But I do firmly believe by the time they are done updating this, or by the time that we've seen a number of years go by, this will be the definitive circuit competitive racing game on the market. There won't be anything that touches this in terms of quality visuals and the experience that it does offer. Something that is technical, competitive, but also something that is rewarding, fun, and arcadey if you need it to be. It really is a Forza Motorsport for everyone. There's also a huge list of options for accessibility if you need that sort of thing, and also just how approachable the game is. It does try to coddle you when you first jump in, and honestly, it took me a little bit to get back into the swing of doing a motorsport game, because I'm used to the Horizon titles, because it's been so long since we've had a motorsport title. So I had the track guidelines, I had the brake assist, but the brake assist always drives me crazy. It's like I need to be able to do my own thing. And as as I played, the more I got used to it, the more I removed some of the safety constraints and whatnot. And I got to the point that I think I was actually driving pretty effectively for the most part. I still bang and crash into other cars, but that's because I like to do that when I'm playing racing games. Are you maybe not supposed to? Yeah, sure, why not? It is a competitive racing experience if you are, doing that sort of thing in a multiplayer. I'm sure people get mad and whatnot, but I don't care. I'm having fun with it. And that's the biggest thing, is I enjoy the experience for what it is. And it's just really quite an expansive offering from many perspectives. Whether you are doing some sort of fine-tuned evolution of the Drivatar system for the AI that you compete against, or you're playing against others in multiplayer, there really is just a lot of ways for you to compete and explore You could jump into the career championships, you could do the online events and offer yourself so many new ways to get rewards and compete. You can customize your vehicles with greater levels of detail than we've ever seen before. But all the existing things that you love are also here, changing the colors, choosing maybe just a regular manufacturer color, grabbing a livery, maybe creating your own liveries, which are the custom paint jobs for vehicles that others have created. That sort of thing is all here. Fine-tuning from others. Those options are all present and once again available within this game. And it took a long time for a new Forza Motorsport. It really genuinely did. But I think the waiting has largely been worthwhile outside of the technical issues with crashes and stuff that I was having, which I do believe they'll probably get that cleaned up pretty fast, if not already ahead of by the time you've gotten to play this. But yeah, they've just really done some remarkable work here. I was a little worried in regards to just how long it was taking to get this, and I could definitely see why things got delayed a bit, especially if there were, sort of some bugs and stuff they had to iron out. But this is a largely well-polished, beautiful racing game. It is simply gorgeous, and I loved the Performance RT mode. It actually feels like you're playing something that is fluid, performant, and visually impressive, and a technical presentation of the actual current gen. Because that was my biggest worry, is waiting this long and then having a racing game that doesn't live up to the expectations of, basically mine or even others in regards to presenting something that really does push the envelope. That is the Forza Motorsport series. There's always something technically impressive, always something where they are pushing the bounds of the technology of what we've seen in a racing game. And then, coming off of so many years, you do sit there and you wonder, it's do they still have it? Is this still going to be something that blows my mind when I go and play it originally? And yeah, I think they have quite hit the mark here. This does feel like a significant improvement across the board. From having a career mode that you can actually dive into that so many people have requested. Yes, I've seen so many people that have wanted a career type mode. And from there to the online multiplayer, which seems to be expanded upon in many exciting ways, and I can't wait to see what else they do with that over time. And then just quick play, racing, competing, and making sure that every one of those track scenarios is different. And the hundreds of different cars that react realistically, that get damaged, that get torn, that get scratched, that bump into each other. The crunch of that audio in a way that we really haven't seen with this franchise. I've seen a number of complaints over time in regards to how the audio has been handled for Forza titles. And this one, I think they really do genuinely make a big improvement in regards to just how it sounds when you're doing things, from the roars of the engines to the crunching of these vehicles smacking into each other when it happens, or just the scratches. Even the raindrops and the weathering conditions kind of impacting the way you drive and your experience when you're sitting there kind of racing along. It's all wonderfully well done. And I think really the heart of this is the tracks that they've provided. These tracks feel different. The weathering changes the way you react on these tracks. The tracks themselves get scuffed and marked and beaten and torn as you continue to race along and aim to be the best out there on the circuit. Because if you're not first, you're last, right? That's the biggest thing here, is you get to experience a really lively set map. And you may not think of these details because you're like, oh, it's just a circuit. It's a set closed thing. How dynamic is it going to be? But these really do come across as differing places, like differing types of weather, whether it's heavy rain, light rain, bits of fog, bits of haze, a different time of day, racing at night, racing in the evening, racing in the morning. It's always different every single time you go about it. And that just helps make the replayability of these environments so much more in-depth and detailed. I think they truly nailed the realism elements that they were pushing. I think technically there's a lot of differing options, and this is a really well put together motorsport entry. This is by far the most impressive racing game I've seen of the current generation, and it really does actually push the technology further in some really, really exciting ways. Once again, Forza Motorsport, where dreams are driven. yeah, it really is just that sort of excitement. You jump out there on the track and you race along, and you see all the different vehicles and the beautiful backdrops, and just everything is so well put together, so well set up, and it's just like a wonderful feeling when you get out there and race along. And I hope to see this expand and grow over time, and hopefully we get to see some of our favorite tracks get added that we're missing, because really that's just the holdup is, more content at times is desired, but I think for the most part this is a very well put together launch package.